Today, we are going to share the results of the annual Central Illinois crop tour with Jerry Gidels right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, we have been traveling over this weekend around the same counties. You can tell all the counties. In the Central Illinois area, and we found slightly higher yields than last year. Isn't that right?
Yes, yes, it was a well, it was an interesting tour. It was something that I've not experienced. I'm sorry to say that you and our good friend Tony Ria, that was on along with us here, it turned into probably half the stops or more. We were in pouring rain, and then the fields were pretty muddy and things like that. It's kind of a general wrap up here. We took a trip out of Chicago and really started looking at the fields in Grundy County there, south of Morris. Took a highway there down to Livingston County. We actually missed the stop we traditionally do in Livingston because of the rain, but and then through Livingston, it took a small quick tour of Wolford, and then went across McLean County, DeWitt, back through McLean, back up through Ford, and then Iroquois was our last county that we took samples from. Basically, this is 90% or 80% of a tour looking at corn yields, because soybeans during August can put on a lot of pods, or have the pods they have can actually be abortive. It gets hot and dry and things like that. I'd have to say this year, though, since the weather's turned around in the first part of July, the soybean yields could see some improvement as we go through the balance of the season. Last year was completely the opposite. We had our rains in May and June and dryness the rest of the summer. This year it was the other way around. But overall, as you mentioned, our yields for corn were 210.7. Last year's corn average was 209.8, so just 9/10 of a bushel less than last year, or excuse me, more than last year. And so we saw some really good crops. We saw some very poor crops at times, and there's this at times. I know you and I both kind of wondered how could we have this dynamics. We had actually the first one we had on the corn tour was in Grundy County, there south of Morrison and towards the southern part of the county. We had a 200 and practical number of 270 bushels, and that's right up at the highest yields I've seen on any tour that I've seen in that part of the world for the last 10 years from there. But we had great populations. We talked about at the time, we had ears at 36 average for the two rows. We had good length. We had 18 rounds. I actually had 120 in that field. That's how you get a big yield like that. From there, and then it turns up that a couple counties away, actually in McLean County, right outside of Bloomington, on the south, just south of there, in a town near Hayworth, we had our first kind of interesting yield of 160 bushels measured in that. It's actually, as I can remember, both of us, we were at a bend site and we came out of there saying, very unusual. Then we saw a typically very good crop in DeWitt County. It's like 235 bushels. Then we came back through and took a second sample in McLean. And in that situation, it was also similar, north of Bellflower, I think it was. From there, and it was 150, 355 bushels. And so, and then the last two stops, we had a little difficulty of getting out when it wasn't raining on us, and definitely picked up lots of mud on our shoes at this point. And actually, the last particular sample in Iroquois County, we actually decided to go west instead of north, just to get out of the rain so we could get the sample taken care of and get back to Chicago. And that, I think looking back at it right now, I think that the two samples that we got there that were surprisingly down in that 155, 160 range, because most of the other than the couple ones we talked about there at the high end, most of the other ones were right around 200 to 210, 215. So that's how we got our average up there slightly, nearly a bushel higher than last year. But I think the real reason that maybe those two particular fields we happen to take samples from, and I think there's some issues like that's going to happen across the state of Illinois. People that might have went ahead and planted their corn early, say late April, early May, and that, which is really a typical time to plant your corn, and that they could have been very susceptible to the heat and dryness that happened during the month of May and June. And I think those particular fields we happened to test were probably that. I know that the stage of growth there, those were in early dent, and they were in a situation where the weather, I think, really ended up impacting those two particular fields. But I think that's something to keep in mind, and I also suggest that easily could keep the corn yield here in Illinois excellent, but maybe not a huge factor, a big jump. Last year's numbers even now have some question marks because of the stocks reports we've been getting here for last year's numbers. So I think it's going to be highly important. The USDA also is in kind of an interesting situation now where they're not really having the kind of say boots on the ground approach here in the month of August. They have went basically the satellites and crop conditions and reports from their weekly crop progress, and that they will start with their enumerators in the September yields. They'll do the measurings and start to make some counts and things like that to get basic. They won't be taking any yield numbers from their designated plots until October, but it's going to be a interesting situation here on corn. But right now, at least, I'm anticipating that the U.S. number could slip down a couple bushels down to 175, partly from the standpoint of other areas of the country not being as much rain recently, and also the fact the crop ratings as they've been most of the summer. So that's important things as I see that what we gained out of this Central Illinois tour. It's always good to get your out there and see what's really happening.
Yes, and another thing that was happening was soybeans. We saw pretty good looking crops over there.
Oh, yes. Yeah. In many cases, we saw a lot of green carpet, as I say, going out the windows here. A lot of times the weather, it was not an easy place to go out and try to walk into a soybean field during the weather we had over the weekend. We did peer into a couple fields and we saw a lot of pods that were already on the particular plants. Now, the one thing that's always deceptive in the fact that in the old days, you always felt like you needed to have a real tall plant so you could have a lot of pods on the stems. But the newer varieties can definitely put plenty of pods, even on maybe a crop that's maybe not, at this point, a crop that's 2 foot tall really is kind of inefficient. You're spending a lot of time trying to make them tall, and you can still get lots of 18-inch to 20-inch crops can make you a good size. But I'd have to say that the same thing applies here, that the USDA doesn't really have any data counts, no pound counts. So the one thing wild that happens, or seems the way they count soybeans yields, is they take a 10-foot square and count the number of pods in it and all that kind of stuff, and then they take those and weigh them out. Definitely don't have that ability to do that on a crop tour when you're trying to cover 400 miles in one day. So, but in general, the beans potentially could have something that could have a slightly higher yield than we have in August. I don't know how that's going to do, and we've had so much weather this year, happening from first of May till now. I'm not sure we're going to be able to find a lot of increases in corn yields. There's going to put more weight on them if you get rain, but on the ear. But it'll be interesting. Right now, though, it was quite an interesting tour as always. I'm glad you're able to join us again this year. But my expectations here, I don't want to forget the fact that I'm kind of anticipating a 51 bushel number here from the USDA. Down 1 bushel from last month, and then we'll see how the month of August proceeds here on weather. At this point, is do we see things go up, or we have things stay the same or go down? And also, there's going to be a lot more other people out there making these crop tours over the next couple of weeks, so we'll get some other inputs, and also other parts of the country. I'd have to say Minnesota's a little choppy. Parts of maybe even parts of Illinois and Indiana, places with the other parts of the country here, and Nebraska. We don't want to forget that our friends at Pro Farmer are going to be putting out their tour 2 weeks from now, I guess. They'll be out making their choices across the Midwest, and that'll also be a big factor to get a sense of where the prospects for 2023.
All right, we look forward to see that harvest being picked. Thank you, Jerry.
You bet, and share with all the people here some of our field reports we did during the tour. We were kind of downtrodden bunch there doing those in the rain, but it was a lot of fun as always. I'm glad you made it out.